What if the most emotional reunion in the Handmaid's Tale universe isn't actually a happy ending, but the beginning of something far more dangerous? Because according to Bruce Miller himself, June and Agnes are going to reunite, not might, not could, but will, and that changes everything. Because once you know that ending is coming, every single moment in the Testaments suddenly feels different. Every choice, every separation, every lie Gilead tells its children about who their parents really are starts building toward one unavoidable collision. A mother who refuses to stop fighting, and a daughter who has been taught that same mother is a terrorist. Now, before we go any further, if you enjoy deep dive breakdowns, hidden details, and overthinking TV shows to the point where it probably qualifies as emotional damage, then hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, it helps the channel massively, and unlike Gilead, you are under no obligation to obey blindly. Also leave a like, because apparently that's how the algorithm decides whether I get rewarded or emotionally destroyed. Now, spoiler warning. This video covers The Handmaid's Tale Season 6, The Testaments Season 1, and confirmed endgame details revealed by the showrunner. If you're not caught up, turn back now before we accidentally ruin your emotional stability. Still here? Good. Because the real question isn't whether June and Agnes reunite, it's what kind of world is left when they finally do. To understand why this reunion matters, you have to understand what Agnes actually represents inside Gilead. Because she isn't just June's daughter. Inside Gilead, she is something completely different. She is Agnes, a carefully constructed identity built on silence, obedience, and controlled history. A child raised in a system that doesn't just separate families, it rewrites them. And that is where the tragedy begins. Because Agnes doesn't grow up wondering if her mother is alive. She grows up being told her mother is dangerous, a criminal, a threat to order, a woman responsible for chaos, violence, and instability. And the most powerful part of that narrative is how normal it sounds inside Gilead. That's how control works, not through force alone, but through repetition, through education, through childhood stories that slowly replace truth. So by the time Agnes learns the reality that June Osborne is her biological mother, it doesn't feel like a reunion. It feels like a betrayal of everything she has been taught to believe. And that is where the story becomes much more interesting than a simple family reunion. Because June isn't just trying to get her daughter back. June is fighting against an entire system that has already rewritten her daughter's identity. And systems like that don't give people back easily. They resist, they reshape, they fight memory itself. Now, what makes the showrunner's confirmation so important is not just the promise of reunion. 3 to 4 seasons, that's not a quick resolution, that's a long emotional war. Which tells us something very important about the structure of this story. June and Agnes are not on a collision course. They are on parallel tracks that are slowly moving toward each other through different versions of truth. On one side, June has become something closer to a symbol, a myth inside Gilead, a warning story told to children, a terrorist who destroyed order. But outside Gilead, she is something else entirely. A survivor, a leader, a woman trying to document what happened so the world cannot forget. And that duality matters, because Agnes is being raised on one version of June, while the audience knows another. That creates the central tension of the entire series. Not just, will they reunite, but which version of June will Agnes meet when it finally happens? Because here's the uncomfortable part nobody likes to say out loud. Reunion is not resolution. Reunion is confrontation. When Agnes finally stands face to face with June, she won't just be meeting her mother. She will be meeting a contradiction. Everything she has been told will collide with everything she will begin to learn. And that kind of emotional collision doesn't end cleanly. It fractures people. It forces choices. It creates distance before it creates closeness. And that's why the Testaments is shaping up to be less about escape and more about identity collapse. Because Agnes isn't just learning who her mother is. She is learning that her entire reality has been constructed. And once that realization starts, it doesn't stop at June. It spreads to Gilead, to the aunts, to everything she was taught to trust. And this is where Aunt Lydia becomes impossible to ignore in this equation. Because Lydia sits directly in the middle of this emotional structure. She is one of the people responsible for shaping Agnes' worldview. But she is also one of the few characters slowly realizing that a worldview is built on contradictions. And Agnes is now becoming the pressure point that forces that realization into the open, a truth that refuses to disappear no matter how much doctrine is applied to it. But Agnes is not Janine, and that difference matters. Janine survived through emotional resilience. Agnes survives through awareness. She is already questioning the system in ways Janine never had the opportunity to, which means Lydia is not guiding her anymore. She is reacting to her, and that shift is subtle, but enormous. Because once an authority figure starts reacting instead of controlling, their power begins to erode, slowly, quietly, indisputably. Now zoom out for a second, because if June and Agnes really are destined to reunite in 3 to 4 seasons, then everything happening right now is just preparation, not resolution, preparation. Agnes learning the truth is not the climax, it's the ignition. June building resistance is not the end, it's the pressure building outside the system. And Lydia's internal transformation is not redemption yet, it's instability. All of these threads are moving toward one place, a confrontation that Gilead cannot fully control. Because the moment Agnes crosses from believing the propaganda to question it, to reject it, she stops being just a daughter searching for truth. She becomes a symbol that Gilead cannot easily contain, a living contradiction to everything the regime has told its people. And that is far more dangerous than any rebel army. So when Bruce Miller says the endgame is reunion, it sounds emotional on the surface. But structurally, it is something else entirely. It has collapsed. Because in stories like this, reunion doesn't mean peace. It means truth finally arriving in the same room as denial. And one of them does not survive that meeting unchanged. So the real question isn't whether June and Agnes find each other again. The real question is what Gilead looks like when they do. Because if Agnes has been raised to believe her mother is a terrorist, and June has spent years becoming the symbol of resistance, then their reunion is not just personal. It is political, it is ideological, it is a collision between two versions of reality that cannot both remain intact. And that kind of moment doesn't just change a family, it changes a system. So the question heading into the Testament Season 2 is simple. Is this a story about a daughter finding her mother? Or is it a story about a daughter discovering that everything she was taught to believe was carefully constructed fiction? Because if it's the second one, then the reunion between June and Agnes won't be the end of anything. It will be the beginning of Gilead finally starting to crack from the inside. And this time, it won't be because of war. It will be because of truth. And that's where the emotional weight of the Testaments really starts to settle in. Because once June and Agnes finally step into the same space again, nothing about that moment is going to feel simple. There will be no clean embrace, no instant forgiveness, no effortless recognition of everything they lost. Instead, what they will find is time, years of separation filled with completely different versions of the same truth. June will be standing there as someone forged by resistance, loss, and survival. Agnes will be standing there as someone shaped by control, conditioning, and a carefully constructed version of reality that placed her own mother at the center of a warning story. And that gap cannot be closed just by saying, "I'm your mother." Because in Gilead, words have been weaponized. Even something as personal as family has been turned into ideology. So the reunion becomes less about reunion and more about negotiation. Two people trying to rebuild a connection while carrying completely different understandings of what that connection even means anymore. That's what makes this endgame so powerful on a structural level. It's not just emotional payoff, it's ideological collision. And when those two things meet inside a story like this, the result is never comfort, it's transformation.